Hi everyone, it's Mariah Rossell. So thank you to everyone who was at Colorado Vernal Equinox with me last weekend and all the amazing conversations we had about consent. I really, really appreciate that. One of the big things that people kept mentioning to me was we know the basics of consent and they wanted more of a consent 2.0. And so I had some great topics of conversation and I'm going to keep weaving those into some more of these videos. And so one of the things that we often will think of when we talk about consent is that we should follow the golden rule. And while this sounds kind of antithetical, consent is not about the golden rule. It's not treat me as you want to be treated. And it's not that I should treat you as I want to be treated. It's I should treat you as you want to be treated. And you should treat me as I want to be treated. Maybe let's not even use the word should. That seems like this is a little bit too directive. But it's about mindfulness. It's about how do we increase our awareness of the situation to figure out where the line of consent is, right? Because consent is not always going to be something where we directly always verbally ask questions. May I X, Y, or Z? Can I? Would this be okay? Consent is often nonverbal. Consent may sometimes be implied. And so when we talk about consent, and it changes, a lot of times we talk about consent, we're specifically talking about sexual consent. But the thing that I really want to emphasize is that consent is not just about sex. This idea of consent is about everything that we do. And particularly in the Burning Man culture, we talk about consent with photos, or consent with material items, or consent with kink, or consent with gifting, or foods, or allergies. There's all these things for consent, right? And so we go to this idea of how we do anything is how we do everything. And that is why consent is such a big issue. Because if we can learn to consent with any of the things that we do, then it just becomes our way of being. And it's really about a way of being mindful and respecting ourselves, respecting our community, and really allowing people to have autonomy and freedom and feel that they can truly blossom into what the person that they want to be, into their personality. And I'll do another video on this one. This video that I really wanted to talk about how we can kind of look for consent. Because we can ask, can I do this? May I do that? But how often do you find that sometimes you get an yes when the answer is really I'm not comfortable or I'm not really? And we could definitely say, well, it would be better if people said yes and really meant yes. And at this point, I've noticed a lot of people give yeses when they're not really comfortable with the yes. Maybe there's a power control issue, right? Maybe the person that's asking is your boss, or they're the one that might make the decision of a promotion, or if you get to do something new in the future. Maybe you really like someone and it's your third date and you're like, well, maybe if I say yes, we'll get the fourth date, but if I say no, I won't. Maybe there's some level of an expectation, or, people will ridicule you or say mean things about you if you say no. And so you say yes, not out of a true yes, but out of I feel guilty or shameful if I say no. We might also say yes because we don't know ourselves that well, because we've never really thought about it, and we feel like the answer needs to be given right away. And this is a huge one. How often do you say yes, and then you're like, why did I say yes? Because I didn't really want to say yes, but I felt like I needed to give an immediate answer, and I was asked. And so that's a really, really big one. And so when you're asking people for their consent, for whatever it is, it's more than just getting the yes. And the things could change. When we talked about this in other videos, is that a yes is not a yes forever. But how can you look for this? Check out the tonality in people's voices, verbal pauses, muscle contractions, oh yeah, I'd love for you to give me a massage. And then they're starting to tense up, and it's like, wait, that's not really a true yes. They might have thought it was a yes, but the body's saying no. Look for facial expressions and just check in. And it doesn't have to, and it can be creepy if you say this too much. This is one of the other things I noticed over the course of the weekend is, as I was talking to people, I was like, why do you keep asking me? I already said yes to whatever it was. And I kept getting the, oh, well, but you said that consent wasn't constant and I had to keep asking. And it's like, well, yes, is the keep asking, but you can over ask. And that's the big thing, is it's a really fine line of, oh, would you like this piece of food? Sure. Well, now that I put it in this bowl, would you still like this piece of food? Well, yes, I asked it and you're serving it to me. That's great. I appreciate that you're really checking in often, but it can also feel really insecure or almost like you aren't trusting me to trust myself. And so that's an interesting line that we can play around with when it does come to consent. And the other thing about consent is about learning what you don't know. And none of us can know what it means to be somebody else. But oftentimes I've found when I ask for consent, the answer is not always what I expected. So this past weekend, somebody offered me a massage, and I said yes. And I was like, is it okay if I take my top off? Because I didn't want to get massage oil on my clothes. And the person said yes. And in my head, I was asking, are you comfortable with me being topless? And the person's response was completely not what I expected. The response was, oh yes, here, let me put a scarf down on my massage chair so you don't get dirt and body oil on my massage chair. They didn't say all those words, but that was what the actions implied. And for me, I didn't consider, oh, are my clothes something that's keeping your massage chair clean? For me, I was thinking, how comfortable are you not knowing me very well with me being topless? And so that was a beautiful experience and consent for me, where I asked someone of what their comfort level was, and their response was completely not what I expected for other reasons. Or there was another time this weekend when a friend asked me, hey, your coat's on the ground, can I sit on it? And coat on the ground, sit on it, that'd be great. And for me, the concern was, oh, my cell phone's in my pocket, please be mindful of my cell phone and don't break it. And big furry coat, no one would have ever, it took her like 5 minutes to find my coat because it was so big and fluffy that you couldn't find the phone right away. And so, that was her experience, was the consent was, may I use your thing? But what I said was, yes, you may, and here's this other thing for you to consider. And so that's the big thing with consent is sometimes it's just a yes or a no, but often it's there's more information than you knew to begin with. And so how do we get the more information other than by straightly asking? And the other thing about consent is being curious. We can often say, is this okay? Or yes or no. But if we can start to ask more open-ended questions, and rather than continuing to say, is this okay? Because is this okay often results in, yeah, or, maybe a guttural sound or very quick, brief response. But if we can ask a more detailed question, ideally it's an open-ended question, meaning one that doesn't go in yes or no, but maybe it's simply like you're doing a massage rather than, is this a good pressure? Would you like me to go softer or harder? Still a closed-ended question because, they can give a one-word answer, but it still gets a little bit more detail. It makes the person pause and reflect and say, is this something that I really want to be doing? Is this something I'm really okay with? Or did I just say yes because I felt obligated or I felt the expectations? And one of the other ones that I really think is an important one is asking consent before giving feedback. So often we want to give feedback. We want to tell our friends how we think they're doing, or maybe they're messing up, or maybe they can do it better. But this is that fine line. I love when people teach me things. And sometimes I am not in the mood to hear it. And sometimes the feedback that they're giving is not particularly helpful or whatever it is. So it's simply like, hey, I see you using that router and may I offer a suggestion? Great. Yes, please do. May I offer feedback is always a very helpful question, because sometimes people are just not in the mood to hear feedback, or they're not in the mood to hear feedback from you. And that's okay. And this is another really big component about consent, is when you ask for consent, it's only really consent if the person feels free to give the answer that they feel called to give. If they feel that they're going to be judged or ridiculed or not having their answer taken seriously, then you're not really in a space where you're asking for consent. You're coercing them into something. You're pushing them into something. You're giving them more expectations. But you're not actually having this open-hearted space where consent can exist. Consent only exists when it's truly a curious, open question. May I? Is this okay? Would you like? But if there's ever the expectation of, well, if I don't answer you the way you want to be answered, then there's going to be repercussions, then you're not getting true consent. And so consent is about offering versus forcing. And this is another thing that comes up a lot, is about people want to help. We always want to help, right? We love to be involved. And so often it's I'm going to just jump on and start helping. And we think that's great because, well, that person was struggling. I would want to help. But this goes back to you don't know what you don't know until you ask, until you have the conversation. And so, for instance, say I'm moving a pile of, this weekend, perfect example. There were a bunch of things that needed to be loaded into trucks. Some of the things went into one truck because they went to one final destination. Some things went into another truck because they went to another final destination. Had I just started picking things up from the pile and putting them in cars, would actually have been a bigger issue than had I just stood there and stared and done nothing. Because had the things gotten in the wrong truck, then they would have ended up in the wrong place. And so we really need to say, may I help? And how may I help? And then really listen to it and not take it on our own and say, I'm just going to start putting things wherever I want them to go. It's about really listening and saying that's where they need to go because that's where the person in charge asked for them to go. And so that's the other big thing about consent is oftentimes if we do things without asking for consent, we end up with a mess that it would have been easier had the person done it on their own without us meddling. And so oftentimes we think we're being helpful, we think we're being useful, but if we don't really have the bigger picture, because oftentimes when we approach a situation, we're approaching in the now. We're approaching a very narrow situation, but we don't have the bigger picture. And the only way to get the bigger picture is to ask, to admit that we don't know what's going on, and to begin that conversation. And from there, now as a community, we can work together and we can't take this personally. If somebody says, actually, I don't need your help moving these boxes right now, or whatever it is, don't take it personally. Again, this is about consent. It's about offering rather than expecting, rather than pushing on any needs or egos or anything. This is about, I have extra time and space and love in my heart, and I would like to offer this to you. And may I help you? And that's the really big thing because, or maybe somebody's just like, I just really want to do this by myself because it's going to be empowering for me to do it by myself. And that's okay. Let them do it by themselves. But if you jump in and start helping without asking them, there can be all sorts of narratives that go through that person's head. Like the aforementioned example, you don't know where it's going to go. Or maybe they see that you are gruffly moving things and this is their grandma's antique china and they don't want it to get broken. Or maybe they said, today my workout's going to be moving boxes, and now you've taken away half of their workout because you moved the boxes. Who knows what it is? And it doesn't really matter. All that matters is you see the situation and you actually ask and then listen to the answer. So consent isn't just asking. Consent is now listening to the answer as well. So I am going to be on a panel this weekend at the Rocky Mountain Burning Arts Summit in Boulder, Colorado on enthusiastic consent in the arts communities in the era of Me Too. So there's 3 other people on the panel and we're going to be talking about this on Saturday evening. So I'm going to post a link in the comments and I would love for you guys to all join. If you have any more topics or questions or things like that on consent, I would love to answer them. And please share this video and post questions in the comments. I'm going to keep doing videos, but I'm going to try to keep them shorter so that way people in their busy schedule have the time to pop on and listen to a little bit of discussion about consent. So have a great day, and I would love to see you guys at the summit this weekend. And thank you so much, Steve. I just saw your comment. You had lovely, lovely conversations with me this weekend about it, and you just hold such amazing space for our community to grow and love and do what we do best. So thank you all so much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.